He called her the help in front of 200 people, told her to fetch more champagne, that the canapes were stale. Not knowing the woman in the server's uniform was the reason he was standing in that ballroom at all. That every signature dish on his Michelin-starred menu, the very foundation of his empire, was conceived in her kitchen, not his. This is the story of the greatest theft in modern culinary history and the night it all came crashing down. His name is Chef Park Min-jun, a culinary superstar who built a $20 million brand on a single idea, modern Korean soul food. Her name is Ilara Vance, a gifted developer who worked in the shadows. For years, the world celebrated his genius, never asking where the recipes truly came from. Until the night of his rehearsal dinner, when the secret they built a fortune on was served, cold, to everyone in the room. This is how a partnership forged in a tiny kitchen curdled into the most public betrayal in food, and why the truth always finds its way to the table. Their story didn't begin in a gleaming test kitchen, but in a shared, struggling supper club in Atlanta in 2014. Ilara Vance, then 26, was the club's sous chef, a Culinary Institute of America graduate with a genius for flavor layering, buried under debt and other people's menus. Park Min-jun, 29, was a charismatic but struggling line cook, newly arrived from Seoul, desperate to make Korean flavors resonate in an American fine dining scene that saw them as a niche. Their first collaboration was an accident. The head chef called in sick before a fully booked themed night. Ilara, tasked with salvaging the evening, found Min-jun in the walk-in, deconstructing a traditional kimchi jjigae, muttering about depth. She didn't tell him to stop. She asked why. He showed her the ferment, the gochugaru, the anchovy stock. She pointed to a reduction of bourbon and smoked peaches she'd made for dessert. What if, she said. What followed was a 16-hour frenzy. They combined her Southern comfort food intuition with his technical knowledge of Korean fundamentals. The result was a dish they called smoked peach and gochujang glazed short rib, served over cheddar grit soufflé. That night, the supper club had its first standing ovation. A food blogger in attendance called it revelatory. In the adrenaline-soaked kitchen after close, Min-jun turned to Ilara, his eyes bright. "You see it," he said. "It wasn't a question. We could build a whole world on this." And so they did. For the next 2 years, they were a single creative unit. By day, they worked their separate jobs. By night, they lived in Ilara's one-bedroom apartment, its tiny kitchen covered in notebooks. The dynamic was established early, and it seemed natural. Min-jun was the frontman, the connector. He secured a rare, discounted stall at the Peachtree Farmers Market for a weekend pop-up. He charmed local producers into giving them samples. He had the vision, the big-picture dream of a restaurant called Hyol, meaning blood, symbolizing the fusion they were creating. Ilara was the engine. She was the one who could translate Min-jun's concept of Korean soul into a reproducible recipe. When he said a dish needed to taste like a memory of home, she was the one who identified that meant incorporating the umami of doenjang into a black-eyed pea hummus, or the crunch of sesame or fried kale into a version of collard greens. She developed the techniques, documented the precise ratios, and stress-tested each plate. She was the architect. He was the dazzling real estate agent showing off the finished house. The pop-up was a sensation. Lines stretched around the block. A review in Atlanta magazine dubbed Min-jun a visionary, a bridge between cultures. The photo showed him alone plating the now famous short rib. Ilara was in the background, a blur by the stove. When she gently pointed out the oversight, Min-jun squeezed her shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Ilara. When we have the real restaurant, our names will be side by side. I promise." She believed him. The dream was too bright, and his confidence was too contagious. The break came in 2017. A video of Min-jun explaining the philosophy behind their gochujang molasses braised lamb went viral. Overnight, he was thrust into the national spotlight. He was invited to New York for a high-profile culinary showcase. The problem? The organizers wanted only the named chef, the visionary. They offered a single spot. Min-jun argued, he told Ilara later, but they were inflexible. He went alone. On stage, he prepared their dish, their recipe, to rapturous applause. He was offered a television development deal on the spot. This was the first major turning point, the first crack in their foundation. Returning to Atlanta, Min-jun was different. The boyish excitement was edged with a new, sharp ambition. The television deal was for a show called Minjun's Kitchen, singular. The network loved him, he explained. They wanted a star, not a duo. But the money from the show, he insisted, would fund Hyol, their restaurant. He offered her a new title, lead developer and culinary director. A significant salary, far above what they'd ever made. But her name would be in the small print of the cookbook, not on the door. It was a compromise, he said. A temporary one, for the sake of the bigger dream. Ilara, seeing her life's work teetering on the edge of obscurity, faced a brutal choice. Walk away from the cuisine she'd helped birth, or step further into the shadows. She thought of her student loans, her family. She thought of the food, their food, finally reaching a massive audience. She took the deal. It felt like a betrayal of herself, but she called it pragmatism. Next 3 years were a blur of surreal dissonance. Minjun's Kitchen was a hit, making him a household name. Ilara moved to New York, working in a dedicated state-of-the-art test kitchen paid for by the network. Her life was a cycle of flights, hotel rooms, and intense development sprints. She created every recipe that made Minjun famous on that show. The kimchi carbonara that spawned 1,000 blog posts, Ilara's, born from a late-night craving, and a jar of homemade beet kimchi. The sweet potato soju tart that won a magazine award, Ilara's, developed over 32 iterations to get the texture right. She was well paid but isolated. Her contract, drafted by the network's lawyers, was airtight regarding intellectual property. All recipes developed during her employment were the property of Minjun's Kitchen, LLC. Her NDA was so comprehensive it forbade her from even publicly acknowledging she worked on the show. Meanwhile, Minjun's star soared. He published a best-selling cookbook, Soul of Soul. Ilara was thanked in the acknowledgments on page 243 for her invaluable assistance. He gave talks about the lonely, relentless pursuit of perfection. The narrative of the solitary genius was cemented in press profiles. The real restaurant, Hyol, finally opened in Manhattan in 2021. It was an instant, spectacular success, earning a Michelin star within 10 months. Ilara attended the opening night, seated not at the chef's table, but at a two-top near the kitchen doors. She watched Minjun, now Chef Park, in his designer whites, accept accolades for a tasting menu she had crafted over 18 exhausting months. The truffle-dusted Jun was her idea. The yuzu persimmon palate cleanser was her solution to a fat balance problem he couldn't solve. As champagne flowed, a well-meaning guest asked her what she did. "I'm in food development," she said. The guest nodded politely and turned away. The pressure and the silence began to warp her. She started having vivid dreams of recipes dissolving on the plate. She compiled a private digital folder, the archive, containing every recipe draft, every email discussion, every time-stamped photo of her in the test kitchen. It was her secret proof, a ghost's ledger. She told herself it was for her own records, but a part of her knew it was a weapon waiting for its moment. That moment seemed to arrive from an unexpected direction. In early 2023, Chef Park announced his engagement to socialite and influencer Chloe Whitford. The wedding of the year would be a fusion of Korean tradition and East Coast old money. And for the rehearsal dinner, Park insisted on creating a wholly unique personal menu, not the restaurant's hits, but something new, intimate, something only he, the artist, could craft. He came to Ilara with a request, not an order. His tone was uncharacteristically humble. This dinner, he said, was the most important of his life. He needed her genius one more time. He needed a menu that told his love story. He would, of course, handle all the front-facing presentation. He offered a bonus so large it would clear her remaining debt. It was the final, cruelest request, to use her talent to romanticize the very life built on her anonymity. And Ilara, exhausted, resentful, but still bound by contract and a twisted sense of loyalty to the craft they once shared, agreed. But she made one demand of her own. She wanted to be there in the room to see it served, to witness the culmination of her work, even if invisible. Chef Park, assuming it was a sentimental wish, readily agreed. He would get her a staff pass, a server's uniform. She could blend into the background as always. What he did not know, what he could not possibly foresee, was that Ilara Vance was done blending in. The night of the rehearsal dinner, she stood in that plain black vest, holding a tray of canapés she had conceived, watching the man who took everything from her prepare to toast his perfect future. The folder labeled The Archive was no longer just on her hard drive. It was in the hands of a journalist, scheduled to go public in 48 hours. But Ilara, after 9 years in the shadows, decided she wouldn't wait for the news cycle. She had a more direct delivery method. As the champagne was poured and the first course was about to be presented, Chef Park turned, spotted her, and saw not a ghost from his past, but merely staff. He snapped his fingers, pointing to a nearby ice bucket. His voice, loud enough to cut through the murmur of his glittering guests, was pure, unthinking privilege. "You, the help, this champagne is warm. Fetch another bottle, and check with the kitchen, the amuse-bouche tasted stale." A wave of polite laughter rippled through the crowd. He smirked, turning back to his fiancée. In that suspended second, every deferred dream, every uncredited recipe, every lonely night in a test kitchen crystallized into a cold, clear fury. The journalist's article would tell the story tomorrow, but tonight, Ilara Vance would serve the truth herself, and it would be a course he never saw coming. The room didn't go silent. It inhaled, 200 people holding one collective breath. All eyes swung from the smirking chef to the woman in the server's vest. Ilara Vance did not look at the floor. She did not scurry to the ice bucket. She placed her tray slowly, deliberately, on a side table. The click of the porcelain on the wood echoed in the sudden quiet. She looked directly at Park Min-jun. "The amuse-bouche is stale, Chef Park. Would you like to discuss why?" Her voice was calm, clear, and carried. It was not the voice of staff. It was the voice of someone used to giving instructions in a busy kitchen. A few guests exchanged confused glances. Min-jun's smile faltered just for a fraction of a second. He recovered with a dismissive laugh. "I think the kitchen can handle the critique. Just fetch the champagne, please." Champagne paired with the first course is a 2018 Blanc de Blancs, Ilara continued, as if he hadn't spoken. She took a single step forward. "You selected it for its high acidity to cut through the richness of the asterisk myeolchai butter poached scallop asterisk, a dish that requires the scallop to be seared in doenjang butter for exactly 90 seconds before the poach. A technique you said was impossible until I demonstrated it for you in July 2021. The notes are in my files, time-stamped." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Chloe Whitford, the bride-to-be, placed a hand on Min-jun's arm, her perfectly composed face now etched with confusion. "Min-jun, who is this?" Min-jun's cheeks flushed. This was not damage control. This was a direct assault on the stage he'd built. "This is inappropriate," he said, his voice hardening, shifting to a tone of managerial authority. "Security, please escort this employee out. She's clearly distressed." But before any movement could happen, Ilara spoke again, this time addressing the room. "My name is Ilara Vance. For 9 years, I have been Chef Park's ghost. I developed the smoked peach and gochujang glazed short rib from the Atlanta pop-up. I created the kimchi carbonara from season 2 of his show. I architected the 8-course tasting menu that earned Hyol its Michelin star." She turned her gaze back to him, and it was like a laser. "The amuse-bouche you called stale. It's a Gamty crisp with sea urchin and a drop of asterisk Macgioli asterisk foam. You told me last week it was perfection. The recipe file is on the server under my login, not yours." The public unraveling had begun. You could see the calculations firing behind Min-jun's eyes. Deny everything, attack her credibility, he opted for a mix. "Ilara has been a valuable recipe tester, of course," he announced to the room, a strained smile on his face. "But every chef has a team, the vision, the creativity that comes from the top. This is a sad misunderstanding about credit." "A misunderstanding?" Ilara almost laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Let's clarify. The sweet potato soju tart, the recipe award you accepted in 2019. Who solved the weeping filling problem? Was it you during your asterisk Good Morning America segment, or was it me at 3 in the morning when I realized adding a roasted barley powder would stabilize the custard?" A man near the front, a well-known food critic, leaned forward, his interest visibly piqued. This was no longer mere drama, this was a technical inquisition. Min-jun was cornered. He could not answer the technical question without either revealing his ignorance or confirming her role. He defaulted to anger. "This is my rehearsal dinner. You are ruining a private event with these lies. Everything you did was work for hire, paid for." I was paid a salary to develop recipes that were then patented under your name alone, Ilara fired back. The Hyol Gochujang blend that's now sold in stores, my formula, trademarked by you. The contract said I was culinary director, but the NDA said I could never claim a single dish. That's not a team, Chef Park, that's an erasure. The dynamic in the room was fracturing. The earlier laughter was gone. Now, guests watched with a kind of horrific fascination. This was the real, raw underbelly of the glamorous food world, served up live. Chloe Whitford removed her hand from Minjun's arm. Then Ilara played her next card. She reached not for a phone, but into the inner pocket of her server's vest. She pulled out a single folded piece of paper. You asked for a menu that told your love story, chef. I wrote it. She unfolded it. Course 1, the scallop, represents your first discovery of fusion in Atlanta, *R* discovery. Course 2, the short rib, the foundation of everything, built in *my apartment kitchen. Course 3, the carbonara, the fame that took you to New York and left me in the test kitchen. Course 4. Stop it, Minjun growled, stepping toward her, but he was halted by the sheer wall of attention. Course 4, Ilara continued, her voice gaining power, is a *bosom with persimmon. It represents the Michelin star, the peak of success, made possible by my work celebrated in your name. She looked up from the paper. And the dessert that's currently plating, a deconstructed hotioc with a bourbon caramel. You said it should taste like a memory. It's the exact flavor profile of the very first dessert we ever collaborated on before anyone knew your name. This entire menu isn't your love story with Chloe. It's the story of you and me, and it ends tonight. The revelation was catastrophic. The personal had violently intruded upon the professional. The narrative of the visionary genius was now tangled in a saga of personal and creative betrayal. Guests were whispering, phones were subtly being raised, not to take photos, but to record. Minjun, seeing his carefully constructed world disintegrating, made a final, desperate play. He appealed to the room's sympathy. Can't you all see she's unwell? She's obsessed. She's been let go from the restaurant for creative differences, and now she's trying to destroy this night, my night. He attempted a look of pained dignity. I tried to help her. I gave her a career. This was the pivot, the attempt to reframe her as a scorned, unstable woman. For a moment, it hung in the balance. Some in the crowd, wanting to believe the hero they'd followed, might have accepted it. Ilara simply nodded slowly. You're right, you did give me a career in the shadows. Then she delivered the blow she'd been holding. And when I asked for a co-creator credit on the Hyol cookbook, your lawyers said no. When I asked for a percentage of the source line royalties, you said it was bad business. But there is one thing you did give me freely: time. Every hour I spent creating was an hour I documented. She finally took out her phone, holding it up, not to show the screen but as a symbol. The archive isn't just recipes, it's emails where you ask me to fix dishes, voice memos where you're confused about processes, test kitchen footage, over 9 years of it. It's not a story, it's evidence. And it's not just mine anymore. By now, it's with the New York Times, ETA, and the law firm I've retained to sue you for intellectual property theft and breach of implied contract. The word sue cut through the last pretense of a social gathering. This was now a legal and financial threat. The air left the room completely. Park Min-jun's face went ashen. He wasn't just losing face. He was staring down the barrel of losing his brand, his licenses, his empire. In the ringing silence, a new voice spoke. It was the food critic standing up. Chef Park, he said, his tone neutral, journalistic. For the record, the Gamti crisp technique with the Macchioli foam, is that your original method? Minjun opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked from the critic to Ilara, to the sea of waiting faces. The man who always had an answer, a vision, a charismatic deflection, had nothing. The ghost had stepped into the light, and in her shadow, the visionary vanished. He did not answer the critic. Instead, he turned and walked, not toward the kitchen or his fiancée, but toward a side exit, his head down, the cream-colored suit seeming to swallow him. The bridge was crossed. The private humiliation was over. But as the door swung shut behind him, a far more public storm was already beginning to brew online, where the first clips from the rehearsal dinner were just starting to spread. The collapse of the House of Park had moved from the dining room to the world. and there was no containing it. The door hadn't even clicked shut before the first video went live. A 23-second clip, shaky, captioned "Celebrity Chef Meltdown," hit a foodie forum at 10:42 p.m. By midnight, it had been viewed over 2 million times. By 2 a.m., the hashtag "Ghosted by Park" was trending. The internet, with its infinite appetite for scandal, had its main course. But this was more than gossip. This was a case study in the rapid, total deconstruction of a brand. The first wave was culinary shame. Professional chefs, food scientists, and even former contestants from Park's own TV show began dissecting Ilara's specific technical claims. A pastry chef with a large following posted a side-by-side video comparing the official Hyol sweet potato tart recipe to an old, obscure blog post from 2017 where a user named Flowerchildav described troubleshooting a weeping custard with roasted barley powder. The blog post predated the show's segment by 2 years. The connection was undeniable. The evidence was crowdsourced in real time. The second wave was financial. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Hyol's reservation line was flooded with cancellations. The waitlist of over 3,000 names evaporated. The network that aired Minjun's Kitchen issued a terse statement about reviewing their partnership in light of serious allegations. The most damaging blow came from the conglomerate that licensed the Hyol gochujang blend. They announced an immediate suspension of production and distribution pending an internal audit of the recipe's provenance. Park's empire wasn't just facing criticism, its revenue streams were being switched off, one by one. Park Min-jun, barricaded in his penthouse with his publicist and a team of crisis lawyers, attempted a countermove. At noon, they released a carefully worded statement. It expressed deep regret for the misunderstanding at a private event, praised Ilara Vance as a talented member of a large team, and announced his commitment to properly recognizing all contributors moving forward. It was a classic non-apology, designed to project contrition while admitting no fault. It ended with a threat. "We are exploring all legal options regarding the unlawful dissemination of private company materials and defamatory statements." The statement was a disaster. It read as arrogant, tone-deaf, and legally threatening toward a woman the public now saw as a wronged underdog. It fueled the fire. Then came the pivot, the "wait, it gets worse" moment. It didn't come from Ilara. It came from a former line cook at Hyol, a young woman named Jae-hyun, who posted a 10-minute TikTok video that went nuclear. Speaking calmly in Korean, Jae-hyun confirmed Ilara's central role, describing how Chef Park would often taste a dish in the test kitchen, frown, and say, "Let's see what Ilara thinks." But then she dropped the new bomb. The plagiarism wasn't just inside the kitchen, she said. The entire concept of modern Korean soul food, it wasn't even his idea first. She then presented a scan proposal dated 2015, sent by a then-unknown Ilara Vance to a now-defunct Atlanta incubator. The title, Soul and Soul, a Culinary Dialectic. The text outlined the exact fusion philosophy Park had built his brand upon. The proposal had been rejected. Jae-hyun's caption read, "He didn't just steal her recipes, he stole the thesis." This changed everything. It reframed the entire narrative from a dispute over individual dishes to the theft of an entire intellectual foundation. Park wasn't a flawed visionary, he was a strategic appropriator. The media frenzy escalated from food sections to front pages. The story was no longer about food, it was about systemic exploitation, creative theft, and the pervasive erasure of Black women's contributions. Ilara, guided by her new legal team, gave one controlled interview to a respected journalist. She was calm, precise, and devastating. She didn't speak in emotional soundbites. She spoke in facts, dates, and file names. She showed the journalist a fraction of the archive, a video of her hands demonstrating the scallop technique, with Park's voice off-camera asking questions. She presented the original recipe notebooks from Atlanta, her handwriting on every page, with Min-jun's occasional notes in the margin. The evidence was overwhelming and methodical. The counter-revelation stacked higher. A former production assistant from Min-jun's Kitchen came forward, revealing that during the first season, Park had worn an earpiece during live segments, with Ilara feeding him explanations from the control room. A food stylist admitted that Ilara would often pre-plate the hero dishes for beauty shots, because Park's own plating was inconsistent. Each new testimony peeled back another layer of the carefully crafted myth, revealing the intricate machinery of deception beneath. The personal toll became public spectacle. Chloe Whitford's family issued a statement announcing the postponement of the wedding, citing the need for clarity. Paparazzi photos showed a haggard Park Min-jun being ushered into his lawyer's office. Meanwhile, Ilara faced a different kind of scrutiny, sudden, intense fame, mixed with vile racist and sexist harassment from a faction of Park's loyal fans who accused her of being a jealous saboteur. The backlash to the backlash had begun. Then the legal dominoes started to fall in earnest. The law firm representing Ilara filed a formal lawsuit in New York State Supreme Court. The charges were staggering: fraud, unjust enrichment, breach of implied contract, and seeking a declaratory judgment that she was the co-author of the copyrighted recipes. The suit didn't just ask for monetary damages, it asked for a permanent injunction barring Park from using or profiting from 27 specific dishes and the Hyol concept itself. It was a move to dismantle the brand at its foundation. Park's legal team fired back with a motion to dismiss and a countersuit for breach of contract and violation of her NDA. The battle lines were drawn in legal briefs, but the real war was being fought in the court of public opinion, and Park was losing. Major food publications began retroactively correcting old articles, adding editor's notes that read, "This article credited chef Park Min-jun as the sole creator." Subsequent reporting suggests the dishes were developed by Ilara Vance. The climax of Act 2 came not from a courtroom, but from a conference room. The Michelin Guide, the ultimate arbiter of culinary prestige, issued an unprecedented statement. In light of the serious and credible challenges to the creative authorship of the cuisine, they were placing the star awarded to Hyol under review, pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. For a chef, this was the equivalent of having a crown lifted from your head in front of the entire world. The star wasn't just a rating, it was the soul of the restaurant's valuation. Without it, Hyol was just another expensive dining room. Park Min-jun's empire was now a smoking ruin of lawsuits, cancelled deals, and shattered credibility. Ilara Vance had won the narrative, but winning the story and winning the future are two different battles. As the media cyclone began to calm, a stark, quiet question remained for both of them: what do you build from the rubble? The confrontation was over. The reckoning was about to begin. In the quiet that follows a very public storm, there are only two paths: reinvention or ruin. For Park Min-jun, the road led irrevocably to the latter. The legal battle he vowed to fight collapsed within months. Faced with the mountain of evidence in Ilara's archive and the catastrophic discovery phase that would have airlifted every private email and financial record into public view, his lawyers advised a settlement, a complete, quiet, and devastating one. He did not admit to fraud. The settlement language spoke of a mutual desire to resolve creative differences and acknowledgement of Ms. Vance's significant contributions. But the financial terms screamed the truth. Park transferred full intellectual property rights of 29 core recipes to Ilara. This included the short rib, the carbonara, the tart, the entire foundational menu of Hyol. He paid an 8-figure sum in damages, a number that reportedly cleaned out his liquid assets and required a loan against his properties. Most critically, he surrendered the rights to the Hyol brand name and concept itself. The thesis he had taken was now legally revoked. The restaurant Hyol closed permanently 6 weeks after the settlement. The Michelin star was quietly removed. The TV show was cancelled. The sauce line was discontinued. The cookbook was pulled from shelves. The brand built over a decade was systematically dismantled in under a year. Park Min-jun vanished from the New York culinary scene. Reports placed him in Seoul, then Jeju, allegedly attempting to open a small, traditional Korean restaurant far from the fusion spotlight. It received middling reviews, often tinged with the lingering shadow of the scandal. The man who had craved the world's attention now seemed to be running from its memory. For Ilara Vance, the path was one of careful, controlled reinvention. She refused to be paraded as a victim or a triumphant destroyer. She declined talk show offers and Netflix documentary pitches. Instead, she did something radical in the age of viral fame. She went back to work. With the settlement funds, she didn't buy a mansion or launch a lifestyle brand. she founded a small, unassuming culinary development lab in Brooklyn named simply Vance Studio. Her mission statement was a direct rebuke of everything she'd experienced, a transparent kitchen for collaborative creation. She partnered with young, often immigrant chefs, helping them develop and legally protect their own concepts. She published the full, detailed recipes for the dishes she'd won back, not in a cookbook bearing her face, but under an open-access license for educational use, with a clear history of their development attached to each one. She turned her evidence into a curriculum on intellectual property for chefs. The industry's reaction to her was complex. Many hailed her as a hero who changed the conversation about credit. Established chefs, suddenly nervous, began prominently listing their culinary developers in menus and press releases, a small but significant shift. But she also faced whispered resentment from some who saw her as a troublemaker who'd blown up the traditional, if unfair, kitchen hierarchy. She was called difficult, a perfectionist, traits that were celebrated in Park Min-jun, but suddenly became liabilities for a black woman in charge. Yet she built. A year after the rehearsal dinner, she launched a supper club series called The Archive. Each dinner featured one of the reclaimed recipes, served with a short, factual narration of its true history, the Atlanta kitchen, the failed tests, the breakthrough. It was not an act of vengeance, but of reclamation. The tickets sold out in minutes for a year straight. Food critics, who once lavished praise on Park, now praised Ilara's clarity of vision and technical mastery, noting the profound difference between executing someone else's dream and realizing your own. The central promise of the hook, the public humiliation that revealed a monumental theft, was resolved not with a kiss or a killing, but with a transfer of power. The woman in the server's vest was no longer serving the man in the cream-colored suit. She was building her own table. Then came the final, surprising detail, the twist that no viral thread had predicted. 18 months after the scandal, a well-known food magazine was preparing a cover story on Ilara. During fact-checking, they reviewed the financial disclosures from the lawsuit settlement. Buried in the exhibits was a line item that had gone unnoticed. Along with the recipe rights and the monetary damages, the settlement included a single symbolic token, $1, paid by Park Min-jun to Ilara Vance for the conceptual framework of Soul of Soul. It was a legal fiction, a mechanism to transfer the trademark, but in the culinary world it resonated like a gong. He had, in the most technical way possible, paid for the thesis he stole. It was the ultimate, court-sanctioned admission that the idea was never his to begin with. That $1 bill, Ilara later admitted in the interview, she had framed, not displayed, but kept in a drawer. A quiet, perfect artifact of a war she never wanted to fight, but won. Today, the landscape is forever altered. Park Min-jun's story is taught in culinary business courses as a cautionary tale about brand fragility and ethical sourcing, not of ingredients, but of ideas. Ilara Vance's story is taught as a masterclass in documentation, legal preparedness, and resilient creativity. The dinner that was meant to celebrate a marriage instead divorced a chef from his legacy and midwifed a new, more accountable chapter in the food world. But this isn't quite a fairy tale ending. There is no grand friendship reforged, no redemption arc for Park. There is only consequence and the hard, quiet work of building something true on a foundation that was once a lie. Ilara cooks. Park somewhere tries to. The public moves on to the next scandal. But in kitchens everywhere, developers glance at their notebooks with a new awareness, and celebrity chefs think twice before claiming sole genius. The revolution was not televised on a cooking show. It was served, course by course, in a courtroom and in the court of public opinion, and the menu has been permanently changed. So what does this story, born in a kitchen and settled in a courtroom, actually mean? Beyond the headlines, the lawsuit, and the viral shame, it forces an uncomfortable question onto the plate of every creative industry. How many empires are built on uncredited labor? The culinary world was just the stage for this particular drama, but the script is rehearsed in tech startups, design firms, music studios, and academic labs every single day. The narrative of the lone genius is seductive and marketable, but it is often a fiction, a brand-friendly mask over a messy, collaborative truth. Ilara Vance's victory wasn't just personal. It became a benchmark. It proved that the ghost in the machine could speak, could be heard, and could win. It demonstrated that meticulous documentation, the timestamps, the emails, the notebooks, could be more powerful than charisma or fame when brought into the light. It shifted ever so slightly the balance of power. Today, a young developer might think twice before signing an overly broad NDA. An ambitious assistant might start a private, encrypted log. The cost of theft, thanks to this case, now carries a visible, calculable price tag. But the lingering question is whether credit should be given. It's why we are so willing to believe the myth in the first place. Why do we anoint solo heroes? Perhaps because collaboration is complicated. It's harder to sell, harder to package. A story with one face is cleaner than a story with many hands. The scandal between Park and Elara didn't just expose a thief. It exposed our own collective craving for the simple story, even when it's a lie. The true legacy of that rehearsal dinner may not be in the settlement dollars or the closed restaurant. It may be in the quiet conversations now happening in test kitchens and studio corners everywhere. It's in the hesitation before someone says, "I created this," when they really mean, "We built this." It's a story about the integrity of creation itself, a reminder that every finished dish, every product, every song is a collective artifact. Honoring that truth isn't just about fairness. It's about respecting the very process of how beautiful things are made. If this story made you think about the uncredited work in your own world, about who builds the stages others stand on, then you understand why we tell these kinds of tales. They're mirrors held up to our systems, our biases, and our compromises. We delve deep into narratives like these to untangle the knots of power, credit, and truth. Thank you for watching. If you want to join us as we investigate more stories of hidden figures and public reckonings, be sure to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines. We have so much more to explore together.